おま、だ、
ツンツンしたい時期もあるよな。
だから。
じゃ、明日からもよろしくな。
Idea Factory International has been dipping into the otome pool recently, which you'd expect considering how many titles their parent company releases within the genre. The team is now bringing Charade Maniacs west, which blends futuristic themes and all the best boys you can imagine. However, with a cast this large, consistency across each route is crucial, so let's set foot into the future to answer if any of these people trust each other enough to fall in love, even with a traitor among them. Before we get into the review, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters for making this possible. Please take a second to check out patreon.com/noisypixel to support independent game journalism.
エンターテインメントです。愛、憎悪、悲哀に疑心暗鬼、それらすべてが最高のスパイス。すべてを有効活用して視聴者を
In Charade Maniacs, the year is 2148. Everyone in this future has what are known as bangles, which are capable of having quite literally the world's information at your fingertips using a simple device that is the size of a wristwatch. Our protagonist is Hiyori Sena, a naive high schooler that recently lost her pet, a robot-type dog called a Palt, to old age. Due to it being a slightly older model, it is impossible to repair, and she cries alongside her family in grief. She then wonders if there was ever one way for him to come back, which is when she remembers rumors about a mysterious live stream going around called the Otherworld Stream. Supposedly, whoever appears on it is granted any wish they desire, but the exact details of how one would participate are mostly shrouded in more questions than answers. As she heads home from school with her childhood friend Tomase Banjo, she ends up blacking out. Shortly after she wakes up, she suddenly gets greeted by a mysterious masked man who calls himself the Director and claims that she is now in the world of Arcadia, a true utopia where any desire can be granted by acting in a series of dramas in the, you guessed it, Otherworld Stream. If you act out the dramas well, you'll be rewarded points, which you can then use to ask for anything you desire and even return back to the real world. If you violate the stream rules, however, you'll be punished for your actions with a punishment game. On top of that, among the 10 members of the staff, there exists a traitor, who's known as the producer. It is possible to accuse someone of being the traitor, but in the director's own words, you can only do so once, and if you're wrong, all of the cast members will be erased from existence. The premise of the story captivated me at first because I enjoy otome games that take place in the far future, but it pains me to say that unfortunately the pacing is rather uneven at times. Certain events felt largely disconnected from each other, and in most of the routes, right when it feels like you're getting to the good part, the writers decided to just end it there and didn't want to flesh out the characters any further than the bare minimum. In addition, 3 of the love interests are initially locked, but the only modicum of a hint I could find was through the flowchart, which is shoved away in a menu option, and even then it just says, "Clear conditions for this branch." I spent several minutes trying to figure out what those conditions were, and eventually I just gave up and went with a different route. And speaking of the love interests in Charade Maniacs, we have a grand total of 9. This isn't new because games like Norn 9 Var Commons and Paradigm Paradox also had more options than usual, but having that many characters makes the issue of giving them all enough depth rear its ugly head. And it's clear that while Norn 9 managed to offset that by having 3 protagonists branching into 3 routes each, thus making the splits much clearer, this time you have just 1, and this is even noticeable with the way that Hiyori acts. Sometimes I can't tell if she's supposed to be utterly naive or just obsessed. One of the saving graces of Charade Maniacs is that the CGs and art style by Teita are really well done, even if some of them look suspiciously zoomed in, almost as if they wanted to show more. Furthermore, the soundtrack and its sound effects are some of its stronger points. Even the chapter transitions are some of my favorite sound effects. Still, you can sort of notice that some elements were basically upscaled from the Vita, so you get some minor artifacts and some overall blurriness in the backgrounds, especially when they zoom in on them. Out of the 9 love interests, my favorite were Takumi Haiji and Mei Dazai. I won't get into details because both of them are locked and there's a good reason why, but even explaining would make me step into heavy spoiler territory. Actually, looking back on it, pretty much every single love interest that's locked has a slightly better written route than most of the initial cast, and that's saying something. That being said, they're not perfect either, and the final ending of Charade Maniacs is a mess, to put it bluntly, rushing things out almost as if the writers were desperate to resolve the plot holes that they themselves created. The first of the routes that felt incomplete for me was Mizuki Yoichi, the one member of the cast whose gender was unknown. I had many high expectations from it given the mysterious air that they had, and having a character with an unknown gender had lots of potential, but the ending felt extremely rushed. The same happened with Ryoichi Futami, a 23-year-old man who attends art school, and Tomase Banjo, the protagonist's childhood friend. Ryoichi's route ended so abruptly that it literally made me stare at my Switch and go, wait, that's it? While Banjo, his character just utterly annoys me to no end. It's obvious that he's madly in love with the protagonist, but good grief, give her some personal space, would you? A common issue is that because the love interest chapters are so short, you start to feel there was insufficient time for some love between the protagonist and the characters to properly develop, which means that most of their declarations end up feeling more hollow than genuine. Any route that attempts to perform a slow burn type of romance will find itself incomplete even after a while. Also, remember the traitor thing? Yeah, that element is brought up tons of times, but the writing also introduces way too many plot points that never end up getting fully resolved. The perfunctory plot of Charade Maniacs certainly doesn't do the translation any favors either. Besides some typos and issues, the text formatting is really awkward. Some of the dialogue just went out of bounds, and some line breaks are completely off, with some of it even feeling like the translator that handled that line forgot to finish it or something. I'm also going to give a B- for the font choice here. It's not bad per se, but it's so thin, and the spacing between characters being so small can make it somewhat hard to read, especially on certain parts of the UI. Charade Maniacs has so much potential, but the cast becomes bloated and the conclusion comes way too early without any level of fanfare to cap off the roots. The narrative ends up tripping over itself as it tries to balance all the relationships, causing Senna to be more of an ever-changing object for plot progression instead of her own character. The translation also comes across as questionable due to the inconsistencies within the cast. Sadly, the few memorable routes aren't strong enough to carry the flimsy plot. Noisy Pixel is giving Charade Maniacs a 5.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all of our future content.
Noisy Pixel.